This is an image from some work done here at Berkeley about where carbon emissions come from per household. And what you see is we talk about an urban-rural divide, but what's interesting is inner cities and the rural areas share something, which is they actually have quite low carbon footprints per household. It's in the suburbs where you see all the auto dependency, the fact that houses are terrible thermal envelopes, where you see the most carbon emissions happening. You cannot jury-rig this land use with electric cars and solar panels and call it sustainable. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons. With electric cars in particular, which is held up as this kind of panacea, it really relies on a clean grid. Most of us don't have clean grids. We're still working on coal-fired electricity. We have to be wary of the things technologists sell us. For example, rideshare like Uber and Lyft was supposed to solve all sorts of problems. Pre-pandemic, it actually drastically increased traffic and congestion in New York City, for instance. There's also this question of, regardless of whether cars are electric, the embodied energy. And you see here that basically when you look at all of the different elements that go into building infrastructure, that's almost twice the carbon emissions per passenger mile traveled when you talk about roads versus transit. And then there's all sorts of other issues associated with car use. We've lost almost 3 million souls worldwide to COVID. We lose about 1.3 million people to auto accidents globally annually. And then there's the inequities, the traffic that causes the rates of childhood asthma and congestion, primarily in Black and brown communities that sit on the outskirts of our cities where suburbanites travel back and forth into cities. The obesity levels and other healthcare issues we're seeing associated with auto dependency. We now understand that technology is not going to buy us out of our lifestyles. We have to rethink our lifestyles. We know that we are going to have to build more of what's on the right, of carless urban places, because again, the carbon emissions per person is so much lower than other forms of living. I also think this comes with a drastic change in technology, particularly post-pandemic, where we're seeing not just the death of the office park, but the death of segregated uses of where one lives and works and shops and so forth, into a more integrated mixed-use model. In Barcelona, they've got this conception called human speed, where when you create a mixed-use environment, people walk more, and when they walk more, it's not just healthier, but they contemplate more and they create more innovation as a consequence of that more contemplative way of living. While we're thinking about those walkable environments, also keeping in mind that those are increasingly the places where gentrification is occurring, where housing is getting less affordable as you get more walkability, which is why, we've had a precipitous drop in the amount of affordable housing we build nationwide. This was in my 2013 book where I talked about a new infrastructure act called the American Smart Infrastructure Act, or ASIA for short. Where we can build what I like to call an infrastructure of opportunity, not just traditional infrastructure, but affordable housing, medical care, and so forth. This comes again with a change in the way we use cities. We used to think about cities as on the left, a kind of hub and spoke. We increasingly live in a lattice work of a city where people live, work, and play all over the city. Marianne Hidalgo in Paris has been talking about the 15-minute city. In the United States, I like the 20-minute city, the idea that you could reach 80% of your daily needs in a 20-minute walk. And that architecture plays a critical role in terms of plugging into that network of uses and experiences, particularly on the ground floor. This notion that if you really love nature, you shouldn't live in it. And we should live in more compact circumstances, largely rail-based, but in a society that also brings us a sense of joy, and that our cities and communities have the culture, the mixed income, the kind of racial and social mix that we really need to create a more harmonious, ecological, and equitable society.
You fast forward to 2017 and you see a dramatic change in inequities across the geography, where rich, highly educated and white populations now live on the north. Black and brown communities largely low income are on the West and the South, and the middle class has all but been squeezed out of the city. And interestingly, as we found in COVID, it now corresponds to health disparities and life expectancies. And so the mayor said this map was a product of public policy. And if it was public policy that created that map, then we can change the trajectory of the city through public policy. And her flagship initiative to begin that process is called Invest Southwest. And what we noted was the lack of investment in the South Side and the West Side of Chicago wasn't so much that there was not public investment, it's just that the public investment was never used to leverage private investment. And this is something that she set out to change. We selected these 10, they're all adjacent to transit and have a number of those traditional amenities that you would associate with like urban villages. And we decided to pull together the resources of about 12 different departments to come up with about $750 million of public funding that would be used to catalyze private investment. We decided to operate at two scales. On one scale is the catalytic opportunity site that has the ability to create a halo of economic activity and opportunity. The other end of that spectrum is the small business development, and to seed small business enterprise in existing structures throughout these same 10 neighborhoods. If you are trying to create equitable development and inclusive growth in Black and Brown communities, well, you'll need a village. We partnered with a number of private entities to create a real estate pipeline of Black and Brown developers, this SIMD, Chicago Emerging Minority Developer Initiative. And there's another program in partnership with LISC Chicago to work called Yield, to work with emerging developers who perhaps are operating at a different scale. And then, of course, the great equalizer is philanthropy that can level the playing field. So we worked closely with the Trowbridge Foundation, the Pritzker Trowbridge Foundation, and others to create pre-development dollars. So all of these pieces had to be put in place in order to meet the moment. And with a very clear attention towards diversity and inclusion, could you create a response that would permeate community wealth building as a part of a developer's response? Could you mandate that there would have to be equitable control, equity control, ownership, and leadership of Black and Brown developers in response to these RFPs, and at the same time set the stage for partnerships that were non-traditional. Of the 12 respondents of the first 3 RFP opportunities, we saw 8 of the 12 development teams were led by minority developers, and they found joint venture partnerships with majority companies to increase their capacity. The majority of these firms were women-owned firms. They were African American and Latino-owned firms, and they partnered with larger majority firms to compete for this work. We engaged deeply pre-COVID in a series of community workshops that were attended by like 500 people each. And then 4 weeks later, we were in lockdown in COVID and had to pivot to this virtual meeting format, of which we've held at this point over 100 Zoom roundtable meetings where we socialize the transformation that we're seeking to create in communities, allowing communities to drive the development process. We went through the patient exercise of exposing to residents how scenarios are developed, that on any given site, there are multiple development opportunities. We could quantify for them that it could support a grocery store or health and personal services, and we could design to that specific need. We requested that the developers make an 8-minute video that introduces their project to the community. As a result of going through that pre-development work, all of the proposals kind of came so close to the point where it became incredibly competitive. 9 of the 12 proposals were joint ventures. Over 275,000 square feet of development potential across these 4 neighborhoods was realized. And this is the method that we're using to bring attention to these corridors to try to recreate a kind of 21st century Main Street that is fundamentally mixed use. It is the 20-minute neighborhood. It's anchored by retail, locally driven retail, and a mixture of mixed income, affordable housing above. And these visions that you're seeing are the visions that we worked through with the community that then drove the RFP process.